Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the monthly members meet. Obviously, today being the 5th of July. Nice to have you all on the call. Thanks very much for joining. I'd like to kick off actually with some sad news regarding Dina. I just really wanted to share, we were made aware yesterday that unfortunately Dina passed away in June. I'm going to read you the text message that we got from her friend Carolyn, which was sent through to Linda. And, I think the purpose for sharing the information is obviously it's very sad when we lose a member. It hasn't happened often in this group yet, but I think it is important to recognize, to remember. And Dina was kind of a silent member. She only really came into our space in March this year. But part of the reason for also wanting to share it is it's also a reminder of just kind of how precious life is and how we need to be celebrating each and every single day. So this is the message that we received. Good evening, Linda. My name is Caroline Mohan. I joined this WhatsApp support group earlier in the year when my beloved friend Dina needed specific treatment for her net of the uterus. You directed her sister and myself to Professor Ruff at the Donald Gordon Institute, and I can only thank you for that advice, as Dina's previous oncologist was way out of her depth when it came to pain management aspects of Dina's disease. Sadly, Dina succumbed to the renal failure on the 9th of June as a result of her chemotherapy and radiation treatment. Could I ask you kindly to provide me with the details of Netsas account so that individuals wanting to pay tribute to Dina may do so in monetary form as opposed to the usual floral tributes? Thanking you kindly in advance for this information. I also reached out to Dina's sister, Elsa, earlier today, and she was also very appreciative of the small but meaningful support that we were able to offer for the final months. I think, unfortunately, they were really struggling with diagnosis and getting the correct oncology care. So when we were able to point them in the right direction and some of the resources on the website, it was certainly very helpful. Dina's family certainly send strength to all of us on our respective journeys and wishing us good luck. So yeah, just wanted to start with that, just really recognizing Dina. Okay, moving on to, I'm just sharing my screen. Can you all see my screen? Okay.
Yes, Duncan, I can see your screen.
Okay.
I can see your screen.
Cool. So what I wanted to do was just provide you guys with a little bit more information around Netsas and kind of what's happening behind the scenes. I guess this is a monthly members meeting, and I think we should actually kind of rebrand this as the patient meeting, because essentially all of us are NET patients. But there is more structure to Netsas. We are an approved non-profit organization. There is a formal board, which consists of 3 individuals. So Professor Pierre de Villiers, who's the chairperson, Dr. Marguerite Morkel, who's the treasurer, and then obviously Linda, who is the secretary. And, it's taken a while to get some of the formal aspects of the organization up and running. But this is really what I've been working with Linda and the board on, is to start putting some structure and process in place to provide better support to the patients, and also to ensure that we've got systems and process for kind of longevity as the organization grows. So underpinning the board, there is actually a constitution, and the board met last month where the constitution was approved. So that now goes off to SARS for registration. We've also got a bank account, which Professor Pierre de Villiers has made a generous donation to help get us going with some of our initial costs. But within the setup of the constitution, I guess there's 2 key aspects to it. So the first is the medical advisory committee, and that's made up of the oncologists, the surgeons, the pathologists, the multidisciplinary teams that really look at the NETs patients and help come up with treatment plans specific to our individual cases. And I think most of us are being supported by a medical advisory committee and can understand and know the benefits of that. And then the second column in the middle there is really the patients committee, which is effectively this forum here, the monthly members meeting. We've got the WhatsApp group where we kind of sharing, I guess, our journeys, our struggles, our wins, our fears, all of that kind of stuff, and really supporting each other. And I think what's been very pleasing is to see the WhatsApp group and the support is really starting to build kind of a momentum and generate you know, a lot of support, which is ultimately the aim. And we can also then obviously have further subcommittees, which at the board's discretion we can put into place as and when is needed. So we just kind of got some placeholders there on the right. Just focusing on the patient committee for a second. I mean, this is really where I guess I've stepped up to support the board. You know, Linda's going to focus more in a kind of role at the board level rather than in the patient committee meeting level. And what my thinking is here is also, I guess, I'm looking to all of us to see how you guys can help with this patient committee. And, you know, this is open for discussions. I'm really just kind of putting it out there just to see if anything resonates and if anyone's interested. But what I thought is that perhaps if we split it into, you know, the three most common types of nets, which looking at our member group is around pancreatic nets, kind of gastrointestinal nets, and then lung nets. If we could have an individual volunteering for each of those sections, then, you know, that can provide some support in terms of helping come up with the agenda for these monthly meetings, helping us find people to talk to, come and talk to us, people to inspire us, people to inform us. You know, last month we had a very interesting conversation around medical aid and navigating medical aid. You know, we're sharing member stories this month, but it does require time and effort to come up with an agenda for the meeting. So not necessarily looking for anyone to put up their hand right now, but if it's something that you're interested in and would like to pursue, please send me a direct message offline. I'll be very happy to engage with you, and it's not going to take up a lot of your time. So appreciate everyone is busy and have lots of things to do, including focusing on healing. So it's not going to suck time, but hopefully it is going to be providing you with a little bit of purpose and also service and giving back, which I've certainly found being quite instrumental in the kind of healing journey. I'm just going to pause there just to see if there's any questions. Okay, then moving on to the, sorry, I think there is one question in the chat. Great, Ross, thanks very much to assist with the gastrointestinal nets. That's fantastic. I'll connect with you offline, but that's awesome. Thanks for the support. This next slide, there's quite a lot of information here, so I'm not going to go through all of this detail, but again, you know, what I've been working on is really bringing some structure to the organization and really getting our strategy onto one page. And this is really, this is a summary of that. So, you know, we've got our purpose, the mission, and then maybe focusing on the 2022 goals. What Linda and I decided earlier in the year is really the two key goals are early detection, which is probably something that we can all relate to, and then growing the membership base. And, you know, on the left-hand side there, in the left-hand column, we've got the 5 strategic priorities, which is around support services, fundraising, awareness and advocacy, marketing, and then operations growth. And then each of those perspectives has kind of 4 or 5 key kind of building blocks. So in the support services, we've got the buddy system, which I think Linda's going to be supporting us kind of building out a buddy system, probably aligned to the 3 different subcategories that we discussed on the previous slide. So that if someone does come into our space who's being diagnosed with a specific net, we can channel them into a specific buddy who's got the right tools and information to share to support them on their journey. You know, whether they've been recently diagnosed or, you know, if they've been long time diagnosed but are only just kind of coming into the Netsas space. Public sector is something that's close to Linda's heart, and that's probably something that she's going to be driving more closely. It's around getting access to individuals, getting care for individuals in the public sector. Linda also offers one-on-one counseling. So just a reminder that she has offered to provide free counseling for the first session for anyone, really. And then if you find value in it and you require further support, you can then discuss with her specifically around further counseling. We've got something around caregivers. At the moment, most of our members are actually patients, but we do have some caregivers that are also have subscribed, and I think most of them are kind of silent members at the moment. And then end of life preparation is also something, you know, we feel is important. It's an important topic to tackle. And this is something Michael has agreed to take on. He is actually a death doula and has done work supporting kind of end of life preparation. So some interesting stuff there. So again, I'll share this on the WhatsApp. I'm not going to read through the entire slide, but I think it's really the purpose is just to share with you, you know, there is stuff that's happening behind the scenes in addition to, I guess, these monthly calls and what's happening on the WhatsApp group. So then a quick update on the latest board meeting. So I spoke about the constitution. You know, we've got the bank account that is now kind of up and running. And once we receive funding, we are then going to start looking at increasing our kind of awareness and advocacy. And on that note, we are also linked into INCA, which is the International Neuroendocrine Cancer Alliance, which is a global organization. We're an affiliate member. INCA are one of their drives, which we're aligning to, is around the awareness of NETs at a GP level. And they're going to be creating materials for the GPs to raise awareness around NETs. And in fact, we've got a doctor, Dr. Martin de Villiers, who's going to be supporting in that INCA process. So there is an aspirational NET patient pathway and brainstorm session that's going to be happening later this month, which Dr. de Villiers is participating in. And then he's going to be involved in a scripted interview process. And those resources are going to be made available to GPs. And they are going to count for CPD points. So there is incentive for doctors. They have to have annual CPD points. There's going to be incentive for them to go in and learn more about NETs. And essentially it's a raising awareness so that doctors, if they're looking at a certain subset of symptoms, just to ask the question is, could this potentially be a NETs candidate? Because if you ask that question, the diagnosis isn't always, I mean, it's not that difficult. You know, there's blood tests, there's urine tests, there's the CT scans, the PET scans. The challenge is often the question is not asked around NETs, and it often gets missed. For example, the path to diagnosis in the US is on average over 56 months, and in the UK is 48 months, which is an incredibly long time. So some interesting stuff happening in that space, which I'll keep everyone up to speed with, but it really is about developing resources to provide kind of access, early detection and access for patients. Are there any kind of questions on the strategy? I mean, I know there's probably a lot on the slide, and as I said, I'm not going through it all, but I will share it. And if anyone has questions, I would suggest that maybe you can pick up with me offline. Okay, cool. So then just moving through the agenda, just checking what I put out there. Yeah, I mean, I think probably from this point, let's really move on to the patient share. And Ross, thanks very much for kind of volunteering. Perhaps if you'd like to introduce yourself, and if I can hand over to you, it would be great to hear your story.
Sure, thanks, Duncan. 59 years old, electronic engineer by profession. Worked in corporate for 30 years. I got retrenched when I was 50, and I have now started my own business, which is real estate. So I own the Jarvis franchise in Centurion. I do a lot of cycling. I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but yeah, I like the outdoors, do a lot of cycling and like to be outdoors as much as possible. So let me relate my story, and I'm going to go back. I guess it's difficult to know how much to put in because I don't know how much of what I've experienced is related to the tumor or how far back it goes or anything like that. So I'm going to put a lot of stuff in, more to see if it triggers anything with anybody else, but to see if there's any feedback or somebody else can benefit from it. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Ross.
I actually started in standard 4. I had my first duodenal ulcer, which was a very young age for that. So at that stage, the way they diagnosed the duodenal ulcer was with a barium meal. So it was 8 hours of x-rays and swallowing a white fluid, which then basically filled up your intestines. So going through my early years, I had several positively identified ulcers, but a lot of gastric pain and a lot of gastric issues and some bowel pain. So in my later years, when I got to sort of be around about 30, ulcers seemed to subside. And by the way, one of the causes of ulcers is this helicobacteria, which I never had, and they could never explain why I had the ulcers. So my ulcers were duodenal ulcers. They're just on the other side of the pyloric valve. And they could never give me an explanation for what they were. I've also suffered joint pains throughout my life. When I was 7 years old, they called them growing pains, and later on in life, they call it phantom arthritis, but I have no physical signs of any joint damage or anything ever occurred. Sometimes I get a bit of swelling on the joints, but after that goes away, there's no physical damage or anything. I've had several times I've been admitted to hospital late at night with abdominal pain, which we assumed because of my history, this was ulcer related. I'd say probably about 8 or 9 years ago, went through the same thing, went into emergency room, had severe abdominal pain, contacted my gastric surgeon, did gastroscopy, done colonoscopies and everything, nothing, no evidence of anything. Through the years after that, I've been suffering more and more diarrhea. It was becoming more and more consistent. General view was it was IBS, something related to that. So also IBS, colon problems, all kind of interrelated. Then around about this time last year, actually on the 17th of June last year, I had another abdominal attack, severe pain. Went in for treatment to the GP. First of all, severe painkillers. Then they did the 2 rounds in the early afternoon at the GP. They closed down at 7 o'clock. I came home. I could feel the pain wasn't subsiding, so then I went to Netsas emergency. From 10 o'clock onwards, I was being treated at the Netsas emergency unit. Round about 11 o'clock at night, they decided to do CT scans. I think the CT scans eventually happened around about 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was a Friday morning, the 18th of June last year. After I did the scans about 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., the doctor on duty handed me my CT scan results and said, "You have cancer." So I did what any good-minded engineer would do. So I started trying to do my own research because I had no more information other than that I had cancer. Didn't know what cancer, didn't know anything about it. Did the research, and the research gave me end-stage pancreatic cancer. So I had some pain I hadn't ever had before in my shoulders and a few other places, but anyway, they carried on treating me with pain meds by sort of 11 o'clock in the morning the next day. Pain had subsided. I was still obviously a little bit groggy and confused with having had the whole night on painkillers. Around 11 o'clock in the morning, I saw the surgeon. I kind of asked the surgeon, do I have end-stage pancreatic cancer? And his answer to me was, I don't really know, but you don't look sick enough. And I've treated some doctors who've had end-stage pancreatic cancer, and they looked a lot sicker than you did. He was then looking for my blood test results. It turns out on my blood test results, there was a, not known to me at that time, there was a positive COVID test. I had already had that evening at Netsas a initial COVID test, the rapid test negative, and then a PCR test, which was also negative. But they came into me and said, okay, listen, we always take a positive test as positive. And since you have no symptoms, we're going to send you home. In 10 days' time, you can come back with our testing, and then we can have a look at what to do next.
Sure.
The surgeon had kind of said to me, well, we need to do a liver biopsy, and we will probably do that with a needle biopsy. Anyway, so I went home Friday morning. My wife was away. She came back on Friday morning. She went to go and test immediately for COVID. During the day, as I recovered, I realized that I had not been tested for COVID outside the hospital, and that test could not be mine. Contacted the doctor, and indeed it was an error made at the doctor's rooms on Thursday afternoon, so I did not have COVID. In any event, me and my wife separated that night. She slept in a different room. We met on Saturday morning for coffee, and while we were having coffee, she got her positive result. So then we went into isolation, me into isolation, my wife into quarantine for 10 days. So obviously you can't go and see any specialists or do anything at that time. So I continued with my Google diagnosis about the pancreatic cancer, and did that for 10 days. So after the 10 days came out, I went to see my own surgeon, who's Dr. Shalfa. He suggested different biopsy methodologies, and we chose to do a laparoscopic biopsy that I did on the 31st of June last year. 1st of July, I went for my first COVID shot. By the 5th of July, I had COVID. So again, I was blocked from going back to get any results.
Yeah.
So after the 15th, when I could go back to the doctor, I went back to the doctor, to the surgeon. He said, yes, in fact, you have neck tumor, confirmed. So luckily it is a gastrointestinal neck tumor, not a pancreatic tumor. Well-defined, grade 1, with a growth rate of less than 1%. So I think it was about another 2 weeks later that I eventually got to see an oncologist. I'd chosen the oncologist on the basis of the fact that I thought it was pancreatic cancer. A colleague of my brother's had been treated for pancreatic cancer and was in remission. And his oncologist was a Dr. Samuel Fourie. So we went to go and see Dr. Samuel Fourie, and he said, well, no problem. We do somatic injections. At your stage, I have a patient who's now in his 10th year. You should be okay. So not really too sure at that stage what it meant yet, or too much about it at all, or what it meant to have a neck tumor or anything like that, apart from the pain that I'd been through and possibly the diarrhea. I asked the oncologist, so what about the pain? What caused the pain? No, they didn't know. They couldn't tell me exactly what caused the pain. It could be vascular, but they don't know. I had for the first time for the first time ever, on the Wednesday before I got the abdominal pain, had my actual first signs of any carcinoid syndrome. So after I'd done quite a hard cycle on that youth day. I was flushed in the evening, my face was flushed, unusually flushed, and I had dark urine. So that was the first time that it had happened to me. Anyway, we went on to the somatic injections. I started in August. Went through September, October. On my visit to the oncologist in October, the night before, I had abdominal pain again, not severe, but enough to keep me awake and keep me irritated during the night. The oncologist listened to my bowel. He said, your tumor is, sorry, what I've forgotten in between is we had the CT scan in the emergency room, and later on they did do a PET scan. So on the first scan, they could not identify my primary. They just told me that my pancreas was enlarged and that I had lesions on my liver. Then when they eventually did do the PET scan, they found nothing in my pancreas, nothing at all. Only the tumors in my liver, something in a lymph node somewhere, and they found the primary in the small intestine. So in October, he saw that the primary in my small intestine was causing obstruction. He immediately had an X-ray, contacted the surgeon, and I went through to the surgeon to schedule the surgery, I think the same day still. It was pretty quick. But it was Dr. Charles van Niekerk, who I'd been doing my gastroscopies with for the last 10 or 12 years. He sat down and chatted to me and said he needs to go and do his research, but you know, to remove the tumor from my small bowel is not a big issue. It should take about 5 centimeters of small bowel, and you have 7 meters, so it's not really material. So he then took another 2 weeks to analyze all the scans and go through everything. He came back to me and said, I think 1 or 2 days before I was scheduled to go in for surgery, he had mentioned previously that he could perhaps offer me something else at the same time he was doing the primary removal. And he said to me, well, what I might be able to offer you is a combination of ablation therapy and resection of the liver. So he said, we might be able to remove all the tumors at the same time as we take out the primary one. So on the 13th of October, I had my first surgery with him. It turns out he took out 50 centimeters of bowel, so 30 centimeters of small bowel and 20 centimeters of large bowel, because the veins on the tumor had spread. So he had to take the surgical margin to be safe. In his research, he had identified 12 tumors in my liver. He came out of the surgery saying that he had to stop. He had removed between 17 and 18 tumors on the left-hand side of my liver. But my liver had become too inflamed to continue, so he had to stop. And but otherwise everything's fine. When it recovers, then we can look at going back to do the right side. My liver became inflamed to the extent that pushed on my diaphragm and actually collapsed my lung. At about the time I was due to recover and be released from hospital, which was around about the 21st of October, they noted I wasn't recovering, and according to my wife, I was starting not to make very much sense. They then sent me for another scan, and my drain had kinked and caused a tumor inside around the drain kink. So on the 23rd, or the Saturday, the 23rd of October, I was back in surgery again. He corrected the drain and he added a second drain in. And he said he was able to remove a lot of the dead tissue from my liver. So my liver was quite encased in dead tissue from the burning of the tumors. When I asked kind of, you know, what is the implications of the dead tissue or whatever, and he said, you know, there is over time a risk of infection, and they don't know how long it'll take for the dead tissue to fall off. The dead tissue does break off and fall off over time. But he said the surgery went well. He was able to clean up the liver. And actually after that surgery on the 23rd, I felt quite a lot better. And both times I was active the next day, walking around after both surgeries. 10 days later, after doing all the growth cultures and everything, they decided that I Still had a CPR count, an infection count of about 110. But they thought that the bacteria or the infection could be controlled by augmentin orally taken. So I got sent home on the Friday. Saturday morning, 2 o'clock, I was back in the emergency room, shivering with a severe infection. Between going back into the emergency room and I think by the next night or by Sunday night, my infection count had gone up to 200. When I went into the emergency room and they took x-rays, I didn't have a right lung. Yeah, they then put me on antibiotics. I was in hospital for a further 3 weeks on antibiotics to kill the infection. Got the infection down, came home. I think my infection count was at 35 when I came home after the surgery. Was taking a long time to recover at home and my drain was not closing. So I think around about the middle of January it was, or early in January, the doctor actually physically removed the drain pipes, the plastic pipes and everything. And I continued to drain. So in total, I had a drain for nearly 4 months. I was draining from my wound. Very disconcerting again, because nobody can really tell you how long it's supposed to happen, what's going to happen, when will stop. And to have this hole in your stomach where the stuff is draining out of, and I presume it was mostly dead liver tissue from the ablation therapy, was also pretty disconcerting. So during this period now from October until around about the end of January, I hadn't had any more injections because of the condition in the hospital, and because the status then, I didn't want to try anything else. So end of January, I went back for my next injection again and started back on the injections. I would say around about end of February, early March, I was out getting a little bit more active and training again. Sometime, I think late in February, the drain actually physically closed then in the end. I think it had about 3 weeks. I just had a plaster on it. It was draining 4 or 5 milliliters every day still. Anyway, so that closed up. I healed up, got fit again. For whatever the chromogranin means, I still don't fully understand exactly how it means and what it means. But before the surgery, when I was actually ill the first time in June, my count went from 530 to 830. Immediately after the surgery in October, it was down to 350. I think around about January when we measured, it was 250, climbed back to 290. And then once I went back onto the treatment again, it steadily declined. So eventually, where are we now? We're in, this would have been the end of June, yeah. So last month, the end of May, my count was down to 115. Normal being 101. Like I said, I'm not sure exactly. They haven't really told me exactly what it means, but what I understand is it means that the tumors are not growing and that the somatolin injections are being effective. What I have done in the meantime is during May, I cycled 820 kilometers. And I've been to.
Sure, sorry, can we just pause there for a second? I mean, that is unbelievable. You cycled 830 kilometers over how many days? That's, Ross, that's extraordinary.
So we were on the road for 2 weeks.
And where did you cycle from?
We started in Paris. We were actually using e-bikes as well. We did it 8 years ago without the e-bikes. We did it with normal bikes 8 years ago, and our objective was to get to Cape Town. So we cycled from Paris. We eventually got through to Middelburg in the Eastern Cape, but one of the bikes broke, so we had to give up and come home. But we're still planning to go back and finish it sometime soon.
Sure, that's extraordinary. That's unbelievable.
So from most points of view, I've lost weight. I lost 25, nearly 30 kilograms when I was sick. I haven't really put it all back. I used to be 111. I'm sitting at about 100 kilograms now. My blood pressure's down. My cholesterol's down. I'm actually struggling to keep my weight down. So the somatolin doesn't seem to be causing me not to pick up weight, which is one of the side effects it's meant to have. One of the scary things is when they gave me the somatolin injections, they gave me a month's supply of basically Lomatol and nausea tablets. When I had my first injection that day, I felt a little bit bad. I might have taken 1 or 2 Imodium. My stools went white, like if you see a dog having eaten bones and you get that white calcium, that's what happened. I phoned them and said, what's the problem? Does this happen? Oh, we've had one other patient it's happened to, but we don't know why. Also, the oncologist said to me, he doesn't know why. Maybe it affects my gallbladder. I still have pale stools, but I don't have a gallbladder anymore, so I don't know what affects them. And after that time, I've never really had any side effects from the injections that I'm aware of. I have a slight, I don't really know what to call it. On some days, especially if I don't sleep well, I have a slight, I guess, kind of somewhere between a dizziness and a dullness, but it isn't really dull because I'm still intellectually capable. But I feel like a kind of almost a numbness in my head, and that's
a brain fog kind of experience.
Something like that, yeah. It was quite severe when I was recovering in February, so January, February, March. I was getting very tired and I couldn't do too much. Today I still get tired quite early, but it doesn't really affect me work-wise. It just sometimes is there more some days than other days. Yeah, my count went up to 140 this month. Oncologist says he's not really perturbed about it. He says it does go up and down. Doesn't mean very much. He said if it got up to 240, he might worry about it, but he's not worried now. In the meantime, I have been to see Professor Ruff.
Yeah.
I've been to see Professor Giorgio Demetrio. Spoken to my GP. So my previous GP has no clue. He just blatantly said to me, he doesn't understand the medication. He doesn't understand the illness. So he couldn't really help me. He kind of helped me psychologically. I went through some mental trauma with the hospital, still not completely over that. So I think some form of PTSD from being in hospital for 5 weeks. I think the not knowing is the big thing. Being an engineer, wanting to know everything. I think the big thing is not knowing. Yes. People not being able to tell you going to be better in 2 weeks or whatever. It's like surgeon says, yeah, the drain sometimes takes longer. And you go and see him and he's not particularly worried about it. And in the meantime, I did get an infection in my suture as well, just to add insult to injury. So I had an abscess in my suture in the whole time with this drain. And I think it was the same infection playing a role together.
So Ross, sorry to interrupt. I'm curious to understand how are you feeling today? Like sitting here this evening, right now, how are you feeling?
No, I actually feel fine. I'm a little bit tired. I've been battling to sleep recently. I've been a little bit stressed with financial year end with the business, but yeah, I actually feel fine. I cycled 55 kilometers on the weekend and I ran 10 kilometers. The fastest I ran 10 kilometers in 20 years, I think.
No, that's amazing.
So that point,
and psychologically, so I'm jumping in here. I'm super curious to know, particularly if there's anything that you can share that might help others in terms of, literally, like, how did you get back on the bike? Like, what did it take? How did you motivate yourself? Because I'm assuming that first cycle was a tough one. How did you, what drove you to do it?
It was scary, but the surgeon said to me from day one, he said, what's going to fix you is being active. And the surgeon said from day one was pushing me to be active all the time. So he was pushing me the whole time to be active. And I have some very good friends. The one that I cycled down to Cape Town with 8 years ago, and they were also on my case, get out, get on the bicycle, get some fresh air and kind of you know, get some health back again. I was from 110, I was down to 84.5 kilograms. So yeah, it was quite scary the first few times that I went out, but activity has always been a big part of my life. So it was something I wanted to get back and do. So I just slowly started each day, started with 10 kilometers, which to me today, I hardly would bother to take my bicycle out for. But that first 10-kilometer ride, or in fact, I think the first one, it was 5 kilometers, was kind of a milestone for me to get going again. But I also have a very close friend who lives next door, and he has been through prostate cancer a few years ago, and he was also nearly dead on the operating theater with an infection, and I watched him come back from that. So that also helped me.
Yeah.
I watched him go step by step, get back again onto the bicycle and help, you know, get his recovery again.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then, sorry, I mean, this, it's an extraordinary story. And I mean, I really appreciate you, you know, it takes courage to tell the story. And, you know, I can even see the emotion on your face as you kind of reliving some of the challenges that you've had to navigate. But I guess if I had to ask, and it's purely from a kind of a time perspective, you know, if there were any kind of takeaways that you would like to kind of share with the group or leave with the group. I mean, if I had to ask you to try and kind of wrap up in kind of 5 minutes, would that give you enough time?
Yeah, let me try and close it. So I think the thing is to try and work the way through the confusion. I mean, I mentioned I've been to Prof. Raf, I've been to Prof. Demetria. They don't seem to understand the somatolin. So there's a tremendous amount of lack of knowledge, and who knows how far along and how long ago this disease was affecting me. It may actually mean that by treating it, that I actually improved my quality of life now. And I'm about to go back for surgery now. Within the next 3 weeks, I will be back in for surgery to do the right side of my liver. And they might cut off most of the right side of my liver this time as a quicker option not to have the burning. But I think, you know, sometimes I have to say that when I listen to the group and I hear how sick other people are, I do feel guilty, but I also feel grateful that I'm not that sick. I can still carry on. And having gone from, and there are people listening I know that have been through worse, but having gone from thinking that I was going to die in 3 months to being able to get back on the bicycle and cycle 800 kilometers, just, I don't know, makes you appreciate life. That's all I can say.
No, it's extraordinary. I've got goosebumps. It's very inspiring. I mean, I think we've all got our own journeys, and they are all tough in their own ways, and we all have different levels of disease, and it's impacted our lives in different ways. But you know, I think part of what this group is about is the sharing and the support. And yeah, I mean, it's an incredible story that you've just shared. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing this information, and even, you know, what you've contributed on the WhatsApp group. I mean, it inspires me, and yeah, it kind of makes me feel like I also enjoy cycling, and I think I need to get out there a bit more. I don't know if there's any other comments from anyone else.
I think maybe also
very
just
inspirational, very, very inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing, Ross.
Thank you.
I can relate.
Previously, it was also inspirational, but I think the difficulty is, and what this group gives is just, there's so much confusion and so little knowledge about what this is and what it does to you. That's the thing for me.
Yeah, and as you say, particularly being an engineer, it's extra challenging.
It's a huge challenge, you know, to know what's going on, you know, what to expect from day to day.
Yeah. And Ross, have you got a date for your next surgery for the right part of your liver?
So I'm currently booked for the 20th. I might push it to the 3rd, just after my next injection, and because I have to get financial year end done. My office was broken into and stripped yesterday, so I also have some stuff to sort out there. So yeah, like within the next 2 weeks, and my target is to be recovered and back on my bicycle by the end of September. I hope this time, not to go through such a long recovery. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I mean, please keep us posted with your actual dates when you're going in, and maybe a goal or a target to work towards. It would be fantastic to see a picture of you on your bike afterwards. Not too soon, but when it's appropriate, it would be great to see a picture on your bike.
We will do that for sure.
Yeah. Awesome, Ross. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate the vulnerability, and as I say, it takes a lot of courage to tell the story. But I believe that there is also it can be cathartic, and there is some healing and even kind of sharing. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for all your ongoing contributions to the group. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. The group gives a lot back with listening to the experiences and the hope of people that actually are beating the cancer day by day.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Ross. Any questions for Ross before we move on? Okay, cool. So I guess I'm up now. Which is quite interesting for me. So so I'm 45 years old. I'm not going to go into too much story about the actual diagnosis. I'm going to try and focus more on what I've been doing to try and manage the disease, and specifically around kind of coping strategies and things that certainly that I found helpful and that hopefully might be helpful for others. I might share my screen as well at certain parts of the conversation. But essentially, so I've been diagnosed with a pancreatic net metastasized to the liver. I was diagnosed in February last year, so grade 3. The liver is riddled. I was treating what I thought was irritable bowel for about 18 months. Also had a gastroscope, and they found H. pylori. So I was treating H. pylori, which was a little bit of a red herring. And I was treating it using functional medicine. And after kind of continually dropping weight and having ongoing diarrhea, decided to have a second opinion and went for another gastroscopy. And when I was actually just having the kind of the meet and greet with the doctor, and he did a physical examination, he was absolutely shocked, because what I thought was a swollen abdomen as a result of maybe a gluten intolerance or celiac or dairy intolerance was actually swollen abdomen, swollen liver. So my liver was kind of swollen all the way down past my pelvis, and was actually pushing all my other organs kind of up. I went for a CT scan and biopsy the next day, which confirmed the cancer diagnosis. The doctor tried to cheer me up by telling me it was the same cancer that Steve Jobs had, which didn't really help at the time. And it was incredibly traumatic. It was very unexpected. I'm, a healthy guy, do lots of activity and eat well, fairly healthy lifestyle. So it was a deep shock and trauma for myself, for my wife. I've got a young family. I've got 2 daughters who are 7 and 8. And it was a very, very challenging time. When I was diagnosed, my CGA count was 12,600. Ross, you're right. So that CGA is effectively, it's a protein that gets released when the cancer cells are replicating. So it's used as an indication of tumor growth. My liver was so riddled that before we started treatment, I was advised to get my affairs in order, because they thought that there was a strong chance of going into toxic shock and having kind of liver failure. So it was an incredibly kind of traumatic and difficult time for me. They kind of, in terms of kind of treatment, surgery was very quickly ruled off the table, just because of the amount of of tumor in the liver. I've subsequently had 4 rounds of PRT and chemo, which fortunately I've responded really well to. CGA dropped over a period of time from 12,600 to about 6,000, down to 1,800, and then dropped down as low as kind of 90 a few months ago, at which stage surgery was kind of potentially going to be back on the table. Been for the 3 monthly PET and CT scans. The largest lesion in the liver is now growing, and had a biopsy on that tumor to see whether surgery might be an option. There's a Ki-67 score, which I'm not sure if you're all familiar with, but it also is another measure of, how quickly a tumor is growing. There's a number of kind of criteria you need to meet to qualify for surgery. One of them is your Ki-67 ideally is kind of less than 10%. Mine was between about 70 and 80, so way out. And the ironic thing is, when I was informed, and this is kind of only 4 weeks ago, that surgery wasn't an option, I was actually quite relieved. The surgery that I was looking at was Whipple procedure, which is when they remove the head of the pancreas and the duodenum, and then followed by a complete liver transplant. And it didn't really feel like that was necessarily the right course of action for me. And I appreciate that might feel or sound like a little bit of a short-term view, but I feel like I'm a walking contradiction, because I actually feel really good. In fact, I feel like I'm vibrating and I've got lots of energy and I'm doing really well. But when I go and speak to the doctors and I go and have scans, it's telling me a very different story. So part of my journey, what I've had to learn is, I guess there's a part where the medicine and the medical knowledge and the science ends, and then there's something beyond that. And I don't know what the word is for what is beyond that, but it's definitely a space of that I'm very curious and inquisitive about. And I've been on a deep kind of personal transformation journey over the past 14 months, kind of just understanding myself, understanding my place in the world, and like really kind of interrogating what is it that I'm here to do. And it's a personal quest that I'm still on, and I don't have the answers for that. But I think one of the things that I do know is that I'm here to support and I'm here to serve people. And I believe that by doing that, that is going to help and facilitate me on my own journey of healing. And I've also had to reframe what healing means. So for me, healing is not about getting back to where I was. I think healing is moving forward from where I am today. And I've also got this kind of sense that I think I'm actually not only healing for myself, but I'm healing for others. And this might sound strange, but I think part of my journey and part of what is happening to me is I've been given this disease because my role is to fight it and to stop it from getting passed on to future generations. And that might be something that's difficult to understand from a kind of a Western medicine and a biological perspective, but that's kind of currently where I am in my headspace. And I'm finding, I guess, this approach very helpful in terms of how I deal with the day-to-day living with this disease, particularly with regards to my wife and to my family, my young girls. It's been very challenging, navigating it. And the way that I've decided to do it is to tackle it head on and take full accountability for what's happening to me, and accepting that in some respects, I might have manifested this disease myself, and I don't necessarily understand that, and I'm not able to articulate why. But I think for me, taking full accountability is a key step to healing. So in terms of treatment, at the moment we are just watching it. The biggest lesion in section 7 of the liver. We're going to be doing scans again in about 7 weeks' time, just to see how quickly it is growing, to understand what the next steps are. There are, I guess, you know, I've had 2 rounds of, well, I've had the round of 4 rounds of PRT and chemo. And there are other treatment options that are available. I can't do more of that at this stage because of my white blood cell count and my low neutrophils. But there are other options available, including kind of chemo-assisted embolization. But it's really about keeping the powder dry. So there's only a limited number of bullets that we have. And so it's about understanding when is the best time to use those bullets. So that's kind of really where we are in terms of treatment. In terms of kind of side effects and things, I mean, I did have quite bad diarrhea, and I did drop a lot of weight. I'm quite a small, skinny guy to start with. So, you know, I dropped 7 or 8 kilos, which was quite a lot for me. But I've put that on and I'm feeling good and I've got good energy levels. I've had a couple of things that have really, really helped me navigate this journey, and some of this is what we're going to introduce into the buddy system. So I'm just going to share my screen and just share a couple of things here, if I can just make sure I get the right thing. So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it, thanks.
Okay, cool. So this is something that I'm putting together to work with Linda to kind of share with people so that we can help each other and people as they are kind of diagnosed to kind of navigate it. And again, the intention is I'll share all of these things. I'm not going to go through everything in minutiae of detail, but it is really around, you know, at diagnosis, understanding that you're going to go through a battery of tests so that the medical advisory team can actually understand your specific case and symptoms. And with each of these nets, we're all very different in terms of what our symptoms are, what are our challenges, what do we need to navigate. And I think, you know, for me, when I was diagnosed, you kind of getting that cancer label is quite challenging, and particularly kind of walking into a chemo ward, and you know, I felt like I was 25 years younger than everyone else, and I was like, I don't really belong here, and I don't really feel sick. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't add up. And so part of my journey has been kind of accepting that. And you know, I think the diagnosis can lead you down 3 possible routes. You know, I mean, cure, we know that in the Netsas example, you know, the only route through cure is through surgery, and that's to remove all of the tumor. And there's always a risk that it could return, but that is a possibility. The other option is, how do you hold it off? And that can be through chemo, PRT, embolization, all of the other kind of surgery, the other options that we've been discussing. And then there's palliation and understanding that, you know, palliative care is also still an active process, and it's not necessarily about giving up. It's about understanding what do you want to do with the remaining time that you have. And that's also something that I've really been thinking about is, you know, my goal is not necessarily just longevity. It's about how much energy and how much can I vibrate and what can I do with the time that I have. And I'm finding that hugely kind of helpful in terms of going through the process. So all of these things, they all have their pros and cons and their risks and their challenges. And Ross, as you pointed out, you know, it's difficult to navigate. There's a lot of gray. There's no clear answers. There's no certainty. It's challenging. But certainly having this information when you're diagnosed around what happens when you are first diagnosed, I think will be helpful. The second part of the kind of the system that I want to share is just around emotional support. So I guess as you diagnosed, it's thinking about things, you know, family or outstanding conflicts or things that need to be said. So really reflecting on your life, on your relationships, you know, if there are things that you want to clear, like in some senses, this disease can be a gift because it gives you an opportunity to really reflect on things. And if there are things that you want to set straight or put right, you have an opportunity to do that. And, you know, there's different ways of doing that. It can be through dialogue, through discussions. You know, if that's too challenging, it can be through writing letters. But it's interesting things to think about. So, you know, I would encourage everyone, on the call, or anyone listening to this recording, to think about, are there things that, you need to make peace with? Then there's an opportunity to do that. Then take that opportunity. Item 2, the key emotional supports for the partner. I mean, this is, particularly for me, my wife and my young families, it's understanding the support that they need. So we've got the carers, but who's also caring for the carers? Recognizing that they're also going through a very traumatic journey. There's a spiritual need. So depending on your religion or your faith, if you have that, really kind of doing kind of deep inquiry and leaning into that, and people who do have faith, I find a lot of support and get a lot of comfort through their faith. And then it's about doing wonderful things together. So creating memories and documenting those memories. And, that specifically for me is relevant for my children, and wanting to create and enjoy the time that we have. And then I guess the next kind of thing to think about is getting your affairs in order. And I had to really do this very quickly before starting treatment, and it was challenging. And it was thinking of things about, like, what are your financial needs? What are the financial needs of your partner? So, for example, we moved assets into my wife's name so that, we wouldn't have to go through a tedious kind of estate duty processes and affairs. And, even things like moving money into bank accounts and stuff just makes things a lot easier, because joint bank accounts, those assets get frozen on your death. So it can take a long time to wind up an estate. So giving some thought to how do you set up your financial affairs to make it as easy as possible for your family and the ones left behind. There's all the challenges of kind of life insurance, if you have that, and navigating that with the doctors and getting them to help and complete all those forms. There's the medical aid, which, we discussed in detail in the last call, so I'll kind of skip over that. But if you have any international assets, does your partner, are they aware of that? Do they have access to that? If you have assets, what are the details? If there's bank accounts, if you've got investments, making sure that, someone has that information. Have you updated your will? So, have a family member as an executor rather than an organization. Because typically, if you have an organization, there's an agreed fixed fee in there. Whereas if you have a family member as an executor, they can negotiate with a legal firm to act as executor, and they can negotiate much lower rates. But that will needs to be communicated and be up to date and discussed with everyone, so everyone understands what your wishes are. I also went through kind of signing a power of attorney. So one for my wife, one for my father, and one for my brother, all having power of attorney should they need that. I created a living will. So I've got if anyone's interested, I'm very happy to share kind of a template of that. But again, it's important to discuss it with your family members so that they know and understand what your wishes are, particularly when you're able to have that discussion. Because if you're in hospital and you're already at the point where potentially, if you're on life support or whatever the case may be, you're not able to have that discussion. So, I've made that very clear and discussed that with all my family members, so they don't have to go through the trauma of trying to make a decision on my behalf. And it's very clear because we've all sat down and discussed it together. So the one resource I would really recommend in this space is something called the Purple File, which again, I'll also share, but it really is, it's a great document, and it talks about how do you prepare for end of life and what are all the things that you need to think about. And it's a great checklist because it helps you just think about everything and navigate everything. And what I found is, although this is a very daunting process to take on, once it's completed, it's actually incredibly helpful because it's enabling you to focus on what you need to. And that's really enjoying the time that you have and spending time with your loved ones, knowing that you are as prepared as you can be, because there are things that you can do to certainly help, but it is also important to kind of be enjoying each and every day. On the medical front, again, so choosing your team of doctors, I'll go through this relatively quickly because I think we're all in the place where we've got teams together, but it's about making sure that you trust your team, that you've got confidence in your team, and that different people will play different roles. And, for me, there's the medical side of things, and there's the science, and the treatment that I've had has been fantastic and I've really benefited from it. But there's also there's the head and the heart space. And so what are you doing to think about your head space and your heart space? And what are some of the, I wouldn't call them complementary therapies, but what are the things that you're doing to help you navigate the mental pressures and stress of living with this disease and I guess kind of fighting this disease? Interesting to have, was it Denise, sorry, who was on from Amsterdam earlier, kind of local versus overseas treatment. What was very interesting for me, I was on an Inca call recently, and there were 8 different member countries on that call, and in 4 of those countries, so in Ireland, in Taiwan, France, and one other, they actually don't even have PRRT treatment available. So South Africa is, we still do have world-class medical care. It is expensive and you need medical aid, but if you do have that, the treatments that we have here available are right up there with the best in the world. So, overseas is not necessarily better. And there's complexity in when it comes to kind of COVID and costs and travel and all that kind of thing. So here are some of the kind of alternative treatments and things to be aware of, so that they can be very expensive. And so obviously, living with this disease is expensive. So it's about managing your finances carefully. For me, liver failure was a very, very real and high risk. So it was kind of a do no harm type of strategy, and really kind of running it past the medical team, and also not necessarily thinking of things that, homeopathic stuff being harmless. These are very strong and powerful. Homeopathy is very powerful, and I do believe in it, but it's not to be undertaken kind of lightly. But there are things that you can do that aren't going to put stress and pressure on the system, things like kinesiology, acupuncture, reflexology, etc. And one of the things that I actually wanted to chat about to this group about is something called a sound journey. And I recently went on a sound journey, which was an extraordinary experience. I mean, it was almost a meditation with two women who were singing, and they were singing different songs, and they were different frequencies and singing at different wavelengths. And it was an extraordinary experience. And it's something that if the members are interested in, I would like to try and set something up where we can do a Netsas specific one here in Cape Town, and also offer to make it available to people online as well. I mean, I can get more information if it's something that everyone's interested in, but certainly I'll definitely provide more information in that space. Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to share, which I've also kind of sharing with people, and again, I think we can pull into the buddy system, is this concept of when you're diagnosed, how do you navigate the trauma of the diagnosis, and how do you support the patient in the inner circle? So this is kind of a concentric circle model where you've got the patient in the middle, you've surrounded by the family members, then close friends, then social friends, and then your medical team, and then community members and everyone else. And really, this is called the comfort in and the dump out. And essentially, the way this model works is that everybody should be comforting in to the circle that's one in, kind of the next circle in. And if they've got challenges and frustrations and anxieties, they should be dumping out. So what this means is that family members really need to be comforting into the patient and recognizing that they're going through their own stresses and challenges and their own journey, because this is not happening to the patient in isolation, it's happening to the whole family. But those family members, it's unhelpful for them to be dumping in on the patient and making the patient either inadvertently or sometimes just because of the pressure situation, feeling we're very aware of the emotional, the financial, the drain that we are putting on our families. So not being reminded of that constantly is not helpful, but the family members need support. So they need to dump out to their close friends. And so it goes out and out and out. And this is really a model which I think is helpful in a time of crisis. So it's not necessarily ongoing in this way, whereas you kind of, the patient is so protected. I don't think it's necessarily holds true for an extended period of time, but certainly when you're in that crisis mode of diagnosis and understanding treatment and treatment plan, it's certainly something that we found very helpful. Yeah, so that's kind of a model that I'd like to build out. I mean, this is very much in draft stage, but this is something we would like to pull into the buddy sessions. Other things in terms of coping strategies. So I do a lot of meditation daily. I find it extremely helpful. There's a lot of free apps out there. There's Insight Timer is a very good app. For those who don't know about Joe Dispenza, he's a very interesting guy. Ross, I don't know if you've heard about him, but he is a triathlete. He's a medical doctor who was hit by a car during a triathlon and broke his back in several places. And he managed to heal himself through the power of his mind, and he healed his back. And he has a number of incredible meditations, actually. And again, I'm very happy to share these. I've got them on Dropbox. I find them very good in helping me keep focused, keeping positive. I do a lot of cold water swims. So being in Cape Town, there's lots of opportunity to do that, and cold showers. So it's an interesting one, this, but with what's happening in my life, there's a lot of things that I have absolutely no control over. And part of my journey has been learning to accept that and surrender. And one of the things that I found interesting is then going into a place of conscious discomfort, which you do have control over. And for me, that's cold showers. So for the last kind of month and a half, I've literally only been having cold showers. And every time I step into the shower, all I want to do is turn on that hot water, and I turn on the cold tap. And for the first 5 seconds, it's terrible. And then I kind of work through that. And then you actually kind of have this kind of state of euphoria. I mean, it's quite remarkable, and it just sets me up for an amazing day. And I find the same with the cold water swimming in the sea. I mean, it's 20 minutes in that Cape Ocean, and it washes away the stress, the anxiety, and helps me keep perspective. Also linked to that is, I don't know if you guys have all heard, if any of you have heard of Wim Hof, but he's the Iceman who does all the swimming in cold water. But actually, what he's really all about is breathing. And so I do a lot of breathing exercises. I do them daily before I meditate. And it's hugely powerful in terms of boosting the immune system, lowering the acidity in the body. And I find that I'm actually able to go into a much deeper meditation if I do breathing exercises beforehand. So I found these things very interesting and incredibly helpful. And if anyone would like to know more or share more, certainly very, very happy to chat about that. And I guess from a family perspective, we're also putting processes in place to help us deal with this journey. So, my daughters are both in play therapy, and that's about setting up a safe space for them, because they're very aware of the anxiety that's going on and the uncertainty. And I guess what we're doing is we're building a runway, and we're creating a platform for support in anticipation of what is potentially to come, and that's end of life, and we don't know how long that's going to be. And I've also learned that, it's, I think if you have things to live for, I think you're going to live longer. And that's kind of the space that I'm in at the moment. As I said, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling strong. That might change, but for now, I'm certainly working with that, and I'm making the most of the time that I have. And that's been a kind of a conscious choice. that kind of leads quite nicely into really, I guess, what's enabling all of this. And that's about making meaning in life. And, you know, I reached out to Linda in June, July last year, and I phoned her and I said, what is this Netsas thing all about? And she explained it to me, and I said, can I come and see you? And she said, cool, when do you want to do that? And I said, I want to come tomorrow. And we had a great conversation, and I said, I'd like to get involved. I'd like to support. I don't know how or what that means or what it looks like. And it needs to complement wherever I am at my life and whatever's going on with the disease and the treatment. And I found this Netsas journey. I mean, it hasn't been a long one for me, but it's been incredibly rewarding. And I'm very grateful to Linda and Pierre and Marguerite and all the members who are part of this organization. And I've got ambitious plans for us. And you know, I'd like to pull people along on the journey, because, you know, I do believe that kind of, you know, helping others and acts of service are key and very beneficial when it comes to healing. Other tools that are available is there's an organization called A Fresh Chapter, and they've got an Ignite experience process. You know, we've had we had the CEO on one of our calls previously, where we did a workshop, an energizing workshop. But the Ignite experience is a 10-week course where it's not just necessarily net cancer, but it's all cancer patients. And it's around, essentially, it's about not making cancer being the most defining thing happening in your life. And I found that super interesting and very beneficial. Sometimes it felt like it was quite a lot of work, but I think during it, I always saw the benefit. And even post the event, it's amazing how many doors and things have opened as a result of doing these courses. So I guess I'm encouraging people to explore these things, find something that resonates, and really kind of jump in, because, you know, I think that's where you can turn this disease into opportunity. And there are gifts. I mean, it might sound like an unusual thing to say, but I wrote something down. I was thinking about it earlier. I just want to make sure that I kind of get this right. But I mean, I think, yeah, I can't remember who it was, but someone was saying something around, you know, pathology is the road to the gods. And through these difficulties and these struggles, you know, I've certainly experienced incredible insights that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I feel that my mind has been opened in ways that previously it wasn't opened. And I have understanding that was previously inaccessible to me. And the journey that I've been on in this disease has enabled all of that. And that's a beautiful thing. And the complexity is we just don't know how long. And I'm no different from anyone else in our organization, and I'm not actually in the world. No one knows how much time they have. And so it's around, you know, what are your priorities? How do you want to spend your day? Who do you want to spend your day with? How do you want to invest your time? Those are things that I encourage people to really kind of think about. Yeah, so it feels like it's quite a lot of it's quite a lot of sharing, and probably a few things to chat about. But I could certainly go on all night, and happy to have a deep dive on any of these topics. If anyone's interested, either kind of offline, one-on-one. But I think the one thing I really would like to understand from you all is, particularly on this kind of this sound journey, it was an incredible experience for me. And I found I was able to access a sense of peace in myself that I previously hadn't understood. And if it's something that you're keen for me to organize, you know, I'll be completely transparent. There'll absolutely be a cost involved. I mean, not from my side. I don't know what that is, but if there's appetite, I think it would be great to set it up. I mean, I think it would be an amazing experience to go through together, and it can be done online as well. Sure. Okay. That's quite a big brain dump from me. Are there any kind of questions or anything anyone wants to ask or clarify?
as you said, that's quite a huge set of information, and it's you've obviously done a huge amount of time and study, and sure, yeah, quite a journey in terms of your understanding. Yeah, I took up transcendental meditation as well, and was doing meditation since I was in surgery. I haven't got back to it. I can't say I've been through some of the revelations that you're talking about, but I think yes, I'd also agree the disease does change your perspective on life and give you other opportunities that you would otherwise pass by.
Yeah, and for me, it's been about actively kind of seeking out the joy. So, we can't necessarily control what is happening to us, but I think what we can do is control our response to what's happening. And what I'm learning to do, I mean, this is an ongoing journey. I don't think it's not something that you ever complete or ever kind of finally arrive. But what I'm learning is to almost pause if I'm having a reaction to something, or if I can sense something coming up, is almost to kind of self-moderate and recognize, and have, through self-awareness, recognize what's going on and go, okay, this is happening. I recognize what's happening. I'm going into that poor Duncan mode. That's not going to help me. That's not going to be beneficial. Let me look at this through a different perspective. Let me look at this through a different lens. Is there some way that I can reframe that's going to have a different outcome? And it's not always easy, and I don't always get it right. But I'm finding that having that kind of consciously having that front of mind, I seem to be getting a better cadence at that, which is making every day more enjoyable. And that's what it's about. And it's, seeing the sunshine on the mountain, it's noticing whatever it is, the flowering plant, or the way your wife looks at you, or your children laughing, and just appreciating and enjoying those small micro moments. That's, for me, is where the joy of life is those micro moments. And the more micro moments you have, the more you realize that actually every day is magnificent. And if that's where you can get to, then if you're having a good day every day, that's a great place to be. And it's not always going to be like this. For me, it's going to change. And I fully appreciate and recognize that. But yeah, I just keep focusing on one day at a time, and being grateful and appreciative. So that's that's me, and that's my story. Thanks very much for listening, everyone.
It's a very powerful message, Duncan. That's all I can say.
Duncan.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, and thanks for holding space for me.
Thanks for having me too. It was deeply touching and informative. Thanks for sharing your journey. I'm the mother of a patient, family member. I really.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. How is Ant? How is Ant doing, Denise?
For me to hear, all the information, other people's journeys, and he's still not decided what to do, but he's getting there, I hope.
Okay, well, please ask him to reach out. Please ask him to join these calls, and ask him to give me a shout. I did meet him for lunch when he first made contact, and we had a good chat. Interestingly, he's also a cyclist, so maybe we need to do a Netsas Argus e-bike ride 2023. We need to have some goals to work towards, to look forward to motivate us.
Yes, it would be good. He's moved back to Johannesburg now. But thank you. He said it was Linda and you were fantastic to him, and thanks for meeting with him. And we hope he'll get to the right place soon.
Yeah.
We'll just decide what to do. He's stable at the moment. Thank God.
Okay, well, we are here for him, and when he's ready, he's always welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me too. It's appreciated, and really I'm most deeply touched, and thank you for sharing your journeys, you and Ross, and they were very informative, and it's nice to know that well, everyone is more or less in the same boat. So,
No, that's a pleasure.
just sorry that everyone is, and wish you well on your journey. I believe that science is improving all the time. I hope there'll be a good outcome for everyone. I hope and pray.
Super. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Duncan.
All right, everyone. I think we're kind of on time. So I'll just check if any other last comments. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording and we'll end it there. Okay, cool. Have a great evening. Nice to see you all. Stay strong, stay hopeful, stay positive. Search those micro moments. Go and enjoy them and share them on the group.
Thanks, you too,
Thank
Duncan.
you. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. Thank you, y'all. Thank you, Duncan.
So keep well. Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
cheers. Bye.
Bye.